All righty. Well, I have 11:01, so we are going to get started. Eric, while I'm doing your intro, can you let people in as they start trickle in?
Absolutely.
Okie doke. Okay, we'll get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our LTAP webinar series, The Roundabout. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Rebecca, and I'm the Kansas LTAP Director. Please feel free to add your names in the chat box so we can all get acquainted. In the meantime, I'll go over some housekeeping rules before today's speaker. So just so you know, the webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel. Please remember to keep yourself muted unless you are directly engaging with the webinar conversation. And so for today's webinar, we'll be hearing from Eric Dieter. All combined, Eric has nearly 40 years of realty, right-of-way, and working with local public agencies experience that support his current position as the Assistant Bureau Chief in the Bureau of Local Projects at the Kansas Department of Transportation. Eric returned to KDOT and the Bureau of Local Projects in July of 25 after leaving KDOT in March of 2012 to work for the Federal Highway Administration as a transportation specialist responsible for the civil rights and realty right-of-way programs in the Kansas Division. In December of 2022, he was promoted to realty specialist in the Federal Highway Resource Center. And then in October of 23, his team was moved into the Office of Real Estate Services in the Federal Highway headquarters in Washington, D.C. But fortunately, his team worked remotely and traveled extensively, so he was able to remain working and living in Barryton, Kansas. Prior to leaving KDOT, Eric worked for nearly 13 years in the Bureau of Right-of-Way and the Bureau of Local Projects, with an emphasis with their right-of-way programs, both internally and externally working with the LPAs. Eric came to KDOT in 1999, bringing over 12 years of his title, insurance, and licensed realtor experiences with him. All righty, with that, I will hand it over to Eric. And if you have questions throughout, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll address them as we go on, but we'll also leave time at the end for questions. So thanks everybody. And Eric, I'll hand it over to you.
All right. Hey, Rebecca, thank you very much. Appreciate hearing all those dates, and it just kind of reminds me that I'm not 29 anymore. So time goes fast, but I am excited to be back with KDOT in many ways. The opportunity to be back working more with Kansas LTAP. When I was with KDOT before, I was very involved with the Kansas LTAP Center, and we were going out across the state, and we were doing presentations. Primarily, like she indicated, that my responsibilities were focused on the right-of-way, and I really enjoyed the opportunity to work with local public agencies in that capacity, and looking forward to being able to do that again. And I appreciated Randy giving me the opportunity and asked me to be a part of this roundabout discussion today. As you can see on this title slide, we're going to be talking about right-of-way certification and lessons learned. But I just appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to other future opportunities to work with you guys. As I'm giving this presentation, if you have any questions, I really encourage you guys to just ask. Raise your hand. I may ask a couple questions, have you guys raise your hand in response. If you want to type something in the chat bot, that's great as well. Rebecca's going to be monitoring that for us, and I think Randy may as well, but Rebecca's agreed to take that responsibility. And she asked as we were starting if somebody has a question, if she wants, it's okay to interrupt me or wait till the end, but we'll try to address those as we go through and not wait till the end. But then we'll also have the opportunity at the end to address any questions that you might have. So with that said, today's roundabout objectives. I want for everyone to have a better understanding of the certification of right-of-way regulations and how that really is applicable to what you do in your capacities with your agencies that you work for. And then with also, if we have any consultants that are on the call as well, and what your responsibilities are as well. Also understanding required certification documentation. We're going to address that a little bit, and understanding KDOT's and LPA right-of-way review process. That is something that we do on an annual basis. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but we are currently in the cycle of doing some reviews of local public agencies across the state. I'll go into a little bit more details as we go through this presentation. And then at the end, I'm going to talk about lessons learned from our LPA right-of-way reviews. Over the years, we've done a lot. And so from the time when I was with KDOT, and then also when I left KDOT and went to the Kansas division, I continued to do those right-of-way reviews with KDOT. And yes, there's a lot of things that we learned. And we'll kind of talk about that a little bit as well. So a lot of times people are like, so with the certification of right-of-way, is that, why do we even do this? Is this just a Kansas thing? Why do you guys do this? Well, no, it's not just a Kansas thing. 23 Code of Federal Regulations 635.309 authorization is to advertise physical construction for bids or proceeds or force account construction thereof shall normally be issued as soon as, but not until, all of the following conditions have been met. And that takes us to the 309C, except as otherwise provided design projects. You guys can see this as well, but the statement is received from the state certifying that all individuals and families have been relocated to a decent, safe, sanitary housing, or that state has made available relocatees adequate replacement housing in accordance with the provisions of 49 CFR, which 49 CFR Part 24 gets into the relocation and acquisition processes within regulations commonly referred to as the Uniform Act. So that's why we do what we do, but also we have to identify all necessary right-of-way, including control of access rights when pertinent, have been acquired, including legal and physical possession. So again, this is why you have to fill out that 1306 form. And it's the certification that you have acquired all the right-of-way that is needed for the project. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But a lot of times when we do these reviews and people ask about the certification, is that really a thing? I mean, why do we have to do this? Well, this is why you have to do it. If you're using federal funds in your project on any phase, then this is why you have to do the 1306 and certify. Again, just taking a little bit more, there's a lot of sub areas within this 309. Talk about all necessary right-of-way have not been fully acquired. The right to occupy and use right-of-way acquired for the proper execution of the project has been acquired. So this gets into sometimes we don't have all the necessary right-of-way at the time that you send in the 1306, or that you're supposed to send in the 1306. You have a schedule that you're supposed to follow that has been given to you by KDOT, and that schedule tells you that you have to have the right-of-way cleared 4 months prior to the PS&E process beginning. And sometimes you're to that point where you don't have all the right-of-way. And so there is the provision in which you can request a conditional clearance, just stating that, yes, we have all the required right-of-way for the project, except the following tracks, and this is why we don't have it. And so, I'll kind of go in a little bit more. I just wanted to throw all these regulations at you, just so you know that, Eric Dieter is not just making this thing up. It is actually regulations that require it. And again, here we get into more of what would justify for us to do a conditional, as they refer to as a conditional certification. We refer to it at KDOT as a conditional clearance, but it really boils down to the same thing. State may request approval to advertise for bids based on the conditional certification, and FHWA will approve the request unless it finds that will not be in the public's best interest to proceed with the bidding before acquisition activities are complete. Now, when we get the federal highway involved in the conditional clearance aspect of it, that is when we actually are utilizing, or you're utilizing, federal funds in the right-of-way phase. Generally speaking, you do not utilize federal funds in the right-of-way phase. Those are done with your local monies. They're not participated in. So it still does require that you get a conditional clearance, but it does not require for KDOT that then have to get concurrence from federal highway to move forward with that. And then again, this kind of just continues when the state requests authorization of a conditional certification to advertise for bids proceeds with physical construction where acquisition, right of occupancy, and use of few parcels have not been obtained full explanation and reasons thereof, including identify each such parcel. What that means is that you have a project, you have approximately 10 tracks on it, and you've been able to negotiate and acquire those tracks, 8 of those tracks, and get them purchased. But you have 2 more, there's 2 tracks that you just cannot come to an agreement with the property owner on. That it's not because of the design aspect of it. It really boils down to the financial piece. They feel that the property is worth more money. I know you never heard that before, but you come to an impasse in which the agency then has to utilize their their powers of eminent domain, and then you have to file condemnation proceedings. And so this particular provision right here addresses the fact that you will clearly identify what tracks you have not been able to clear and for what reasons you have not cleared them, and then what processes you're planning to do to get those cleared. For KDOT, we just ask, and there's a form that would be sent to you by the project manager. It is a request for conditional, the conditional clearance form, and it would just clearly state as to what the track is and why you're not able to clear it. And then it talks about the participation of Title 23 funds and construction delay claims resulting from unavailable parcels. So recognize the fact that we don't want to delay the lettings. We understand, and the regulations allow the fact to move forward with the letting to occur. But having a conditional clearance that's been signed off and where they've clearly identified what parcels are still not clear, that information is provided to the contractors when they are looking at bidding the project. So everyone is very much aware of the fact that these tracks have been cleared, but these have not been. But they will be cleared and should not have an impact on the construction cycle or the construction phasing. But it does give the contractors heads up that, hey, all the parcels are clear except for in identifying exactly which ones have not been cleared. And, the statement has been received that right-of-way has been required in accordance with, again, everything is going to kind of roll around the Uniform Act. All your acquisition activities have to comply with, 49 CFR Part 24, the Uniform Act. And also the Uniform Act also falls within 23 CFR Part 710. So what's unique for Kansas is that we allow the locals to self-certify. As Rebecca was talking, how I was when I was with Federal Highway Administration, one of my responsibilities, I was on the Realty Technical Service team within the Office of Real Estate Services and headquarters, and we provided technical assistance and training nationally. And that exposed me to lots of states and how they actually did their practices and how they would certify projects themselves. And a lot of the states do not allow the locals to just self-certify that they've complied with the Uniform Act. They actually go through the process and review all the tracks that are being acquired for the project. That is very taxing duties to put back on the state DOT to do. But some actually need to do that because of the activities not being in compliance with the Uniform Act. And so they feel like they do need to have more oversight on the right-of-way activities that the local public agencies are responsible for. But in Kansas, historically, we've done, the LPAs have done a good job in following the Uniform Act and their practices. Is it perfect? No. It's not always been perfect. We feel that it's kind of been, it kind of goes in waves, I guess is a good way to say this. But I can tell you that when I came to KDOT in 1999, I was in the Bureau Right-of-Way, and I got pulled in by the Bureau of Local Projects to help with some of the reviews of their projects, looking at the right-of-way files. And I immediately recognized the fact that a lot of the processes and procedures being done by the local public agencies was not in compliance with the Uniform Act. And a lot of it was basically because they didn't know. I mean, you don't know what you don't know until someone brings it to your attention that you're not doing it correctly. And so that is when we initially started, kicked off doing some training across the state and just educating the local public agencies on the, what the policies and procedures are to acquire right of way. We had great successes with the trainings across the state, but to also capture and make sure that we are providing the oversight to the programs that were required to do so by federal regulation, we then started doing annual reviews. And when we first started doing the annual reviews, we were hitting a project in each of one of the six districts within KDOT. KDOT's the state's divided up into six districts, and we were selecting at random. And I just wanted, I always say this, but it's totally true. Just randomly selecting a project that has federal funds in it, not necessarily in the right of way, but within the project itself. And we would just randomly select that project and go out and review the right of way tracks. Contact the LPA and say, this is the project that's been selected, and we would like to meet with you and sit down and go through the right of way files to make sure that the acquisition was done so in accordance with the Uniform Act. So we started doing that, many years ago. Continue to do that. It was, we, like I said, we selected one project in each of one of the six districts, but then we'd also selected an additional project in the MPO area, whether it be the Mark area in Kansas City or the Wampo area down in Wichita. So we're doing a total of 7 reviews annually. Well, then in 2020 and 2021 with COVID and people's ability to meet in person type, KDOT kind of went in the direction of doing more virtual reviews and reduced it from, 6 going to all 6 districts in a year to only going to 3 districts in a year. And only doing, we're still doing one of the MPOs, but the review cycle now is that we will do in the odd year, we will do districts 1, 3, and 5. And also we do, the Wampo, not Wampo, the Mark area. And then in the even years, we do 2, 4, and 6. And then we do the Wampo area. So this year, we're kind of finishing up, trying to get caught back up onto the right cycle. So we are currently reviewing projects for the 25 fiscal year cycle. And so we've looked at projects in one, and we're going to look at one. We did that this week, and then we also looked at one in the Mark district. So we actually did 2 reviews this week, and next week we're going to do districts 3 and then 5, and that will be completed for that cycle. But come this fall, we will be back out to do the 26 fiscal year reviews. So that will get us back on the cycle that we need to be. But going back to this particular slide I'm talking about in Kansas, LPA self-certify, and with that certification by the LPAs, the Certification of Local Public Authority to Kansas Department of Transportation, real property acquisition procedures, the right-of-way clearance, utility arrangements, and other matters. That is where that DOT form, that 1306, is what you are required to submit to KDOT in the local projects. So trying to provide as much aid and tools for you guys to be successful with your acquisition process. And so this particular form that you see in front of you, the real property acquisition checklist, is a checklist that we created many years ago. And the intent was to give this to you when the project had been awarded. And so this is a checklist that would be given to you and for you to make a copy of. So for every track that is involved in your project, a copy of this checklist would then be placed into that project, that track file. And this was, again, it was complete aid to help you to make sure that you knew these are the documents that we need to be including in our right-of-way file. And these are tied to when we do our reviews, we have a parcel spot check form that we utilize in doing our reviews. So the most recent discussion that I've been having with Don Hiskey, who's the bureau chief for local projects, is this form more beneficial for you to continue to, because I think they've kind of gotten out of the cycle of getting these and making them available to you, or the parcel here's and there's the 1306 form, but I'll talk about the parcel spot check form. So at the end of, I'm going to take a small little poll from you guys to see, but this is the information that this tool here, this checklist, is what we hope will then make you successful in collecting and doing all the steps that you're required to do to be in compliance with the Uniform Act. And I mean, just as simple as when we talk about the property owner written information about the acquisition and the brochure. We often make reference to the real property acquisition, Kansas highway roads, streets and bridges. It's a brochure that's to be given to every property owner that is impacted or that there will be a taking for the project. And then it kind of goes through here, property partially, fully donated, because it just goes through all the different steps that you're required to have the documentation to support that you did these activities. And we'll talk about that a little bit more too. But once you have gone through and you've acquired your property and the properties for your project, this is the 1306 form. This is what you're required to submit to KDOT, and it just identifies the project itself. It talks about how many tracks were on the project, how many, the number of tracks that were purchased without using an administrative settlement, and then purchased using administrative settlement. And all this information is collected from you. And there's a reason that all this information is collected from you. Again, it's not just because KDOT wants to have you do more paperwork. It's because KDOT then has an obligation that they have to submit to Federal Highway on an annual basis. They have to submit a right-of-way form to Federal Highway each year, and they utilize the information that they collect off of this 1306 form. And so this is, again, once you have acquired all the properties for your project, you're just clearly identifying what it is that you acquired and what the interests were and the amounts that you spent. And as I alluded to earlier, I talked about that there is sometimes that, it would not be appropriate for you to submit this particular form because you have not acquired all the right-of-way for the project, that you had a tract that you could not come to an agreement. And so you continue to have to negotiate and try and go through the condemnation process with that property owner. And so at that point, you would then request for a conditional clearance. And this is the form that you then have to identify what it is that you have, which tracks that you have not acquired. And what's important for you guys to understand too, and I'm going to put on my glasses as this is, I know it's kind of a little bit small for me as well, but the bottom line here is that it says if any track is a condemned proceeding, the city and county agrees that the amount of the award stated in a report of appraisers in said case shall be paid in a timely manner so as to not delay the project. So what we'd kind of run into from time to time is that we would have a project that we had agreed to an additional clearance to be issued, and the project would be let. And as the tracks that were being condemned went through condemnation, the awards came in higher than what the agencies expected them to be. And they're like, well, that's a little bit too rich for our blood. So we're not going to pay that. Well, that just totally abandons the whole acquisition process, and it delays everything. And so the project's already been let. Well, that, as you can only imagine, that is only but problems for everybody involved in this entire process. So that particular statement at the bottom there is just stating that we understand, we're agreeing to the fact that no matter what the award is, we're going to pay it. That doesn't prevent you from being able to, appeal that award. And you have, by all means, you can appeal it, and hopefully the higher courts would then, perhaps the award would be reduced. But there's no guarantee that that's even going to happen either. But it does definitely, if you're requesting a conditional clearance for the project to move forward and be let, this definitely will, but you should, be aware of the fact that we expect you to pay that money, those monies into the court, so this project can move forward. And that's why it's required that that it's not signed off just by the public works director or at that particular level. It needs to be signed off by the chairperson, or by either the city council chair or the county commission chair. We require that it be signed off at that level. You guys are at, does anyone even look at that 1306 form? And like I said before, yes, we do, because we take the information off that form, because this is the statistical report form that has to be submitted to Federal Highway every year. We have on the call Jonathan Kolkmeyer with Federal Highway Administration, and he gets this, he makes sure that KDOT submits this form annually. And it just provides this information to Federal Highway Administration headquarters office, and they have to keep track of this information. They're required to do so by law. So the information that we collect on that 1306, this is where it goes right into this sheet, and you can kind of see all these fields. There's a lot of fields there, but all the information that we're collecting from you allows us to fill this out correctly. So talking about the LPA right-of-way reviews, and I talked about this before, we have 4 projects randomly selected, federal funds were utilized. And the reason that randomly is bold, underlined, italicized is because I cannot emphasize enough to you that when a project is selected, it's not because of a red flag or, oh, we got a bad feeling about that. I mean, it is just randomly selected. We go through the processes here at local projects, working with our the road team lead, and also we establish what all the projects are for the particular fiscal year, and whatever district that we're working on, whatever the 3 districts that we're working on, and then it's just a random process in which we just select a project, and then we give notification to the LPA. I just did a review yesterday, or no, let's see, today's Friday, so Wednesday, and the LPA was humored by the fact that I don't know if you guys have, yes, I know you've all met Jenny Egging. She's on the road team, the team lead, and the way that she puts in her subject matter, she says, "Congratulations, you're the winner." And I don't think you guys look at it as being a winner to be your projects reviewed, but it really is a benefit for you in so many ways if you have been selected. Our reviews are definitely not a gotcha moment. We're not, ideally we hope that we don't find any issues whatsoever. And it is more about it being a training opportunity. Yes, we're looking at providing and hopefully going to start doing more in-person training with all of you and making that available to you so you can be successful with the acquisition process. But some people think, oh, you're just looking for us, just looking for the issues. No, we are not looking for issues. We're hoping to go in and find, nice, the track files to be perfect. I am going to give a shout out. We did have like I said, we had 2 reviews this week. One of them, it did not go well. It did not go well at all. In fact, there were a number of deficiencies that we found in our review. And we are having to do a correction action plan for that particular LPA to correct it and to bring their acquisition process back into compliance. Because at this point, there's not the documentation and support that they acquired the right of way in compliance with the Uniform Act. And so we could just simply say, sorry, you did not comply with the Uniform Act, therefore we're going to defederalize this project. It's more beneficial for all of us that we work together and we try to correct those deficient areas and get get everybody back into compliance. So that was the one review that we did. The second review that we did was absolutely amazing, and I'm going to give a shout out to them. The city of Olathe did an amazing job, and they have for a number of years with their acquisition. We were able to go in. It was a project that consisted of 22 tracks, and as we were going through and looking at the documentation, everything was unbelievably perfect. I mean, it was a reviewer's dream to go through that. That's what we like to see. I mean, we were this thrilled as to how well that went. But going back to the other project that we're going to be, we'll work with the local public agencies to bring that back into compliance and provide them with the tools to make them successful in the future. But we're going to work on this. We're going to get it done in a timely manner to get that documentation in order. A lot of times you guys will have the documentation, but if you're using a consultant or there's somebody else within your agency that handled the acquisition work, it just didn't get from their computer to your track files. So it's just a matter of just getting that documentation to support it. Because the statement that I use all the time is that if we go and we do a review, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. And until you can demonstrate that the documentation is there to support the actions, then we have to just treat it as it didn't happen until you can get us that documentation. So as a part of our review, this is the form that we use. I've always treated this particular form as an internal document for our review teams. And I'm finding out that some of the road team are actually providing this to the LPAs so they can understand and see what is expected for them to have within their track files. I showed you that form earlier, that checkoff, that checklist. It has this, many of the same fields. It's a little bit structured just a little bit differently. And the last couple of reviews that we've done, I've just asked the LPAs, do you guys like this particular form as a guide to help you be successful in making sure that you're getting the correct documentation for your track files and your acquisition processes? Or do you like that checklist? And right now, it's a 2-0. People like this parcel spot check form versus this form. So I'm going to try to see if I can pull this off. Raise your hand if you like this checklist. I think I can count the number of hands up. Raise your hand if you like this checklist. Okay. All right, so I got 3, 4. Okay, we got 4 people that like this one. Okay. How many of you can lower your hands? So we're going to take another poll. Now we're going to raise your hands if you like this form as a tool to help you, ensure that you follow the processes correctly. Okay, we got 5, 6, All right. So more people like this. Okay. I will say that in the conversations I've had with Dawn, she likes this one too. She's like, I like the information that's on this. Moving forward, I may make some modifications to this a little bit because I'm not sure how it might be beneficial to leave those fields for the date and the amount. But go ahead and lower your hands. Appreciate that little informal poll. That helps me, helps us to, again, just want to make sure that we're providing you with the tools that you need to be successful. Here's that parcel spot check form, a little bit bigger. And, as we go through that, I mean, the first thing that we look at, we want to make sure that the certificate of title is prepared, which would identify who the property owners are. And then just works our way through trying to, did they get the brochure? And then the valuation process. And then the agency approval. Something that's important, I just want to point out real quick, is that yes, you go through the valuation process, whether it's appraised and reviewed or the waiver of the appraisal process, but it still requires that the agency has to approve whatever that amount is that comes out of those valuation processes. And that is what establishes just compensation. And that, just compensation is what required to be presented to the property owner in writing. So, but then we just got to go through, and these are all the elements that we're looking for. And we get down to the bottom of it. Are there any signs of coercion? And what we don't want to see in your notes is that I met with the property owner and told them that we need them to donate it. If they don't donate it, then we're not going to do the project. That's a little coercive. So we don't look favorable upon that. So don't do that. And then just kind of making sure that there was any signs of or any evidence of discrimination against the property owners. So those are things that we're looking for. And then what we do that once we kind of go through this form when you look at this one over here is where we identified if we had any deficiencies, we'd identify what those deficiencies were and then what needed to be done to correct those deficiencies with their review and in their practices. So again, we found that to be very beneficial, and there's 8 key areas that we review. Areas most commonly deficient. I mean, it's what we are finding most commonly of an issue, and this is where our lessons learned goes to, is that we don't have a clear valuation. If they utilize if you take the class on down the road here, we'll get into the details as what the Uniform Act requires you to do. But you have to determine what the value of the properties are. And what we're finding is that a lot of times the values are not completed in the determination on proper format. And then also if a property was donated for the project, there's 2 donation forms that are to be utilized. A donation where they waive the agency's requirement to do an appraisal, and a donation where they still want the agency to do a donation or to appraise it. But if we'll be told by the LPA, yeah, they donated the property. Okay. Part of the donation form and why we require it to be part of the documentation is because the landowner agrees that, they know that they're entitled to compensation, but they waive that. And so we want the property owner to sign off that, yeah, I know I was entitled to compensation, but I waive it. So that form is missing a lot. The agency's approval, where the agency has to approve the value in the just compensation and establish just compensation prior to it being offered to the property owner in writing. It is not a matter of you determine what the value is, and then you go and say, hey, property owner, this is what we're willing to give you. Property owner agrees. And then you go and talk to your governing body and say, yeah, this is what we offered and this is what we agreed to. So I need you to approve to pay them. No. You have to have that done prior to making a written offer to them. The documentation supporting the written offer was presented to the property owner. That is oftentimes an issue as well. And another one is the just proper note taking and having a complete diary of all contact with the property owner. From the day one, I met with the property owner. I provided them with the brochure of making, what their rights are. And then, you go back and you met with them and provided them the written offer. Every time that you met or had any contact with that property owner, whether it be phone call or whether it was an email, you should capture each of those events in order. Again, going to the city of Olathe in that review, oh my gosh, their negotiation notes were incredibly detailed. But, and it wasn't too much information. I don't think you can collect too much information because it's all a matter of, making sure that your documentation supports all the activities that you claim that you did. So, those are the top issues of what we see as most commonly as deficient. And like I said, here's my statement again. If it isn't documented, then it didn't happen. And over the years, we're providing the training, in-person training, and then we also did some webinars and providing training. But we're still coming across a lot of deficiencies with our reviews. And when I was still at KDOT, I started pushing that we should have some type of a right-of-way certification program in which the LPAs have to complete some basic training. And it really wasn't until I got to Federal Highway that local projects they saw the pattern and the trend of a lot of the same deficiencies. And they agreed that, yeah, let's create a right-of-way certification program. Ron Seitz was bureau chief at the time, and we implemented it. And honestly, it really has been very successful in the fact that it has reduced the number of deficiencies in the reviews for the most part. There's still some, like I said, we had one review this week that did not go well, and come to find out they had not, there's those that should have been participating in that training had not. So the training is very simple. I mean, you register through the LTAP. They've done a great job in helping us put this together. And it's a matter of just watching 6 videos and then taking a test at the end of it. We keep, track of who's passed it, who has not. And so that has definitely made an impact on the success with the right-of-way program. And we are looking to bring back the in-person training because, I mean, I really do find that to be way more beneficial than sitting at a computer and doing that type of training. When I was with the Office of Real Estate Services, we provided both in-person and virtual training. Randy teaches NHI classes, and he's had to do both as well, in person and virtually as well. And hands down, I think that there's truly more of a benefit for the in-person training for so many reasons. So I say more to come because I'm working with Rebecca as we move forward to try to bring back the in-person training. And the only way that it's really going to be successful is a partnership between KDOT, Federal Highway, and the Kansas LTAP Center. So it's a great partnership that we've had in the past. And I only think that's going to continue once we kick that off again. So with that, I hope you learned something. But here's an opportunity. If anybody have any questions, here is my contact information. There's my phone number and email. I didn't see anything pop up in the chat during the presentation. But if you have any questions, I try to keep it. I do okay on time?
Yeah, no, it's exactly 11:45, so
all right.
Perfect.
Dang, what's up with that?
Yeah.
Randy, you have to be proud of me, buddy. I see Wayne has his hand up. Go ahead and unmute yourself if you ask a question, Wayne. You are muted. Wayne, did you have a question, or is that hand up from voting on the which form you like best.
I'm thinking that's the case.
That might be the case.
Does
Fair enough.
anybody else have any questions or comments from Eric?
Eric, this is Justin Mater. I probably talked enough. Sorry about that earlier.
You're fine.
Question on the value of just compensation. So do we have to have proof of what we offer? For instance, like, do we have to have like previous property sales that we can justify our offer, or can it just be whatever the commissioners choose to offer?
No, it has to be. So if you're using, comparable sale, let's say that you're going to, there's a valuation by regulation, you are to appraise the property, and then that appraisal has to be reviewed.
But what if it's that simple and uncomplicated tract?
So that's the next, if you are utilizing the waiver of the appraisal process, then you can use an estimate of just compensation. You don't use an appraisal form. And that can be done by internally from your staff, or you can, work with a realtor and working with your appraiser's office, and you would look at comparable properties and sales, recent sales of comparable type properties, the highest and best use is similar. Then that number is then put on that estimate of just compensation form. And that dollar amount that is calculated, that amount is what is presented to the governing body, and they must approve that amount. They can't approve it. They can't approve less and say, no, that's too high. We instead of that that calculated out to be, $7,500. Let's just offer them $5,000. Offer, at $7,500 is too much. Offer them just offer them $5,000. No, they cannot approve anything less than what your valuation process determined.
Okay, so but we have to have a save our method for coming up with that value, and we have to provide that.
Correct. And typically what you'll see on that estimate of just compensation form that you'll find in, everyone they've had an opportunity to look at the BLP's project development manual. And within that is a chapter dealing with right of, acquisition. And there are some attachments, appendices that there is an estimate of just compensation form. And that form will have an area in which you'll have sale number 1. And that's where you got that information from the county appraiser's office, so many acres and what the total sale was. And then you have 3 of those current sales, and they may have different amounts, of course, because of the size of the properties, but you do the math, and a 1 acre tract sold for $22,000, and it's comparable type property. It's ag land. It's not irrigated, and property that you're dealing with, so it comes out 1 acre is at, I say, $22,000. Well, then the property that you are dealing with and that you need to acquire a half acre from those folks, you're just going to reverse the math. So half an acre. So instead of being $22,000, it'd be $11,000. That makes sense.
Yeah. So can we use county valuation?
Yes.
For that?
Yes.
Okay.
But they're going to but you are going to have to you just can't use like this is what the county, this is what they appraise it at. No, you have to get county information from where they collect their information of current recent sales. Okay. So they can provide you with recent sale type data. It's not, this is what the county has it appraised at. It needs to be a little bit more, it needs to be fresher than that.
Sure. Is the simple and uncomplicated, at one time it was at 10,000. Is it still 10,000?
It's now 15,000.
Okay. I was thinking it went up.
It went up, and it can go up even higher. And for conversation's sake today, let's just stick with 15,000. Come to the class and I'll go into more details
Yeah. Okay.
on how it could be higher. But the key too, Justin, is that yes, it has to be below that $15,000 threshold, and it has to be a simple taking. It's critical that it's simple. It's a strip taking. There's no damages to the remainder. Um, that is important. It can't be, proximity damage or eliminating access, potentially damaging the remainder of the property. It has to be a simple taking. And most generally speaking, that's what the county LPAs are dealing with. On the bridge replacement projects, they're out in rural areas, and there's not structures, or personal property structures that could be impacted by the taking. So making sure that it's below that $15,000 threshold and that it's a simple taking.
Okay. I've got another question, but I don't want to hog up all the time, so I'll wait a
Anybody
little bit,
else?
see if someone else has another question.
Anybody else has a question? Raise your hand.
Yeah, I had a question. Can you explain why a temporary easement is considered right of way?
It is considered right of way because you are taking a right away from the property owner. And whenever you are impacting a property owner and taking a right, whether it be temporary or permanent, it is considered to be right of way, and they are entitled to just compensation for that taking. So the way that you go about the calculation on that can be different. I mean, if it's a temporary easement, you cannot, you don't necessarily have to give them a full 100% value of what it's worth. You can do a schedule and offer them a percent of what you're taking. An example would be if the property that you're acquiring, if in full value, is worth $10,000. If you're to acquire the entire, if you were to acquire it for fee or permanent easement, it's $10,000. You're only going to be using it for the construction of your project. And so you would look to see what type of return that individual could get if they were to invest that $10,000, and that they would possibly get like 10% of that as an investment. And so you would take 10%, and then you look at the term as to how long you potentially would prohibit them from using that full right. And generally speaking, people look at 2 years. And so you take 10,000 times 10%, which gives you $1,000 times 2. So they'd be entitled with that calculation for $2,000. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. And also, I want to that it's a great point that gives me the opportunity to say some agencies have looked at, instead of getting a temporary easement, that they'll look at just getting a right of entry. And they'll just say, oh, we're only going to be on there for a short period of time. So we just need permission to be on your property. So, we need you to sign this right of entry. Right of entries are not acceptable as a substitute for a temporary easement. If you're taking a right from that individual for a period of time, they are entitled to compensation. And a right of entry does not offer them any type of compensation. Okay, Justin, back to you, buddy.
Well, you just really talked about it. My question was just the value of temporary easements. If there was a set rule of thumb, a little more guidance, or it's just whatever we come up with to.
It's what your agency has established. You just have to be consistent.
Okay.
You make sure that whatever calculation that you have agreed to do, that you're consistent, because there are some agencies that do pay them 100% for a temporary easement of the value. There's some, like I said, that have the 10%, 5%, it's all over the board. But it's just a matter of ensuring that they are getting some type of compensation for the fact that you're taking a right away from them, and they're entitled to the compensation for that right being taken.
Yeah, for like crop ground, this has usually been unlocally funded, but at least pay for the crops that's going to be damaged if it's ag ground. I mean, I
Right.
try to at least
Right.
do
If you're
that.
not, if you're going to prohibit them from being able to harvest their crop, absolutely. And
Yeah.
that would be a cost to cure item. Um, because I mean, you're going to offer them an amount for that temporary easement, which is the real property. And then if there was any crops that would be damaged as a result of your taking, either, depending upon the timing, especially with crops, if you can time it to where you don't impact the harvesting and the planting,
But
good
that's
for
almost
you, but that never
impossible to know when
happens.
the
So
contractor's going to get started, though.
exactly. And
So,
so trying to control that is, you're right, Justin. If you could just offer them and pay them for the crops,
yeah,
that's absolutely fine.
sure. Okay, thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Okay.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else, thanks so much, Eric. I really appreciate it. And like I said earlier, this will be up on our website after a couple edits, so you can rewatch it as much as you like, and keep an eye out for our next roundabout that will be in August. So thanks everybody for being here.
Thank
you
you.
guys.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate you doing this for us. And just to remind everybody that our newsletter came out today, and kind of a summary of Eric's presentation was included in the newsletter. So if you want to go back and kind of read a little bit about what he talked about, it's there.
And if anybody has any questions, here's my contact information. Please, I'd much rather hear from you before you run into any issues with your projects instead of trying to fix it afterwards. So understand the fact that there is a process, and I don't expect, even after completing, if you participate in our training, I don't expect you to have all the answers, but at least know that there's a process, and that probably should ask some more questions before you move forward and with your acquisition processes. So, Randy, thanks for asking me to do this, and Rebecca, appreciate it, and look forward to seeing everyone.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Take care.